The boardroom was an aquarium for sharks, polished glass, dripping tension, Rolexes winking in the fluorescent light. At the head of the table, Archer Brentwood prepared to stake his reputation and his future on a single moment. Billion-dollar eyes watched as he tapped his finger on a laptop case, surrounded by legal pads, coffee cups, and corporate armor. But no one noticed the woman pouring coffee into bone-white porcelain at the far edge of the room. That day, the stakes were nothing short of seismic. A $120 million pitch that could set Archer's career in stone or send him tumbling from Silicon Valley's glittering heights. The room bristled with investors, the Hudgens twins, tech royalty, Rashmi Desai, queen of biotech, smirking financiers in steel-gray suits. Archer's breath came icy. He'd spent months refining the pitch, locked in with formulas and forecasts until the numbers blurred into gospel. Still, something felt brittle. His gut whispered it, but he drowned doubts in another shot of espresso. The waitress, whose name badge read Maya, was all quiet grace, skin deep and luminous as black coffee, dreadlocks twisted into a neat, low bun. Her uniform was crisp, shoes sensible, attitude invisible. She flowed between investors, ignored by those who mattered, her presence a blur in memories afterward. Archer was used to being watched, not watched over. He built everything on control, numbers, strategy, presentation. His ordinary world was a ladder, always climbing, always desperate to prove he belonged. He'd grown up far from this ocean of wealth, and the chip on his shoulder was as old as his father's debt. The boardroom, for all its elegance, still reeked of fear and ambition. He glanced at the glass doors. His last mentor's voice echoed in his head. "They don't just want innovation, Archer. They want confidence. Remember, hesitation kills." He could not fail. Then, as he connected his laptop and the lights dimmed, Archer heard the whisper, a voice contralto gentle threading beneath the metallic drone of conversation. "That's the wrong formula." He blinked, looked up. Maya lingered nearby, eyes steady on the spreadsheet glimmering on his screen. For a heartbeat, their gazes locked, hers full of private knowledge, a warning hidden beneath the hush. Archer's heart stuttered. The formula? Impossible. He'd checked and checked again. The projections, the pivot table, the risk curve, all ruthlessly perfect. But Maya didn't flinch. Just a breath of courage, a minute rebellion against all protocols, a black waitress unseen by decision-makers, risking her job for a stranger at the zenith of his anxiety. She moved to pour coffee for the next executive, but the world inside Archer fractured. Doubt yawned open like a trapdoor. What if she was right? He stared at the screen, sweat starting beneath his collar, and for the first time in years he felt utterly unsure, seen in a way that unsettled every thread of certainty. No one else seemed to notice. Laughter bubbled. The investors sipped. The timer for the pitch blinked red. 5 minutes. But Archer's future, $120 million to reputation, the validation of a lifetime, now hung on a single hushed warning. He was about to speak to begin the biggest pitch of his life. Yet outside the glass walls, the world rolled on, uncaring. No one knew, except Maya and Archer himself, that everything was about to spin off its axis. And as Archer's trembling finger hovered above "Start Presentation," the weight of 2 lives, 2 worlds shifted irreversibly. Sometimes the only thing that saves you is the voice nobody else hears. What happened next would haunt and remake them both. Archer's world constricted to a tunnel, his heart pounding loud enough to drown out the investors' idle chatter. "That's the wrong formula." The words ghosted around him, more real than the million handshakes that brought him here. He shot a glance to the far side of the room. Maya, the waitress, was gliding silently toward the credenza, her expression unreadable but her eyes fixed, resolute. Archer's thumb hovered over the trackpad, sweat collecting along his hairline. He hesitated for what felt like forever. 18 eyes narrowed, waiting. Rashmi Desai leaned forward, her sapphire ring tapping impatience on the glass. "We're all eager to see your vision, Archer," she said. "Let's begin." He flicked to his opening slide, starting the pitch on autopilot, his story, his company, their problem, and the dazzling tech set to upend an industry. The numbers sparkled. The curve, his curve, wound up the profit trajectory, dazzling with promise. Graphs animated, claims soared. But beneath the described confidence, ice barbed Archer's spine. Was it possible? Could he have missed something? Or was this sabotage in disguise, a moment's distraction, a fatal error from someone who shouldn't even be in the room? Still, he found himself stealing quick glances at the figures on his spreadsheet. Maya's warning scratched at his mind, a thread he couldn't pull loose. His voice faltered slightly at the details, the ROI percentages suddenly suspect. His mind spun through alternate possibilities, risk factors that somehow he'd dismissed in the late-night marathon of work. Was it a decimal, a sign reversed, or something deeper? As the pitch reached its crescendo, Archer noticed Rashmi's eyes narrowing at his slide. "Can you clarify the net margin projections? They look unusually optimistic for a Q2 launch." The Hudgens twins conferred in a low, critical murmur. A cold wave crawled up Archer's back. Uncertainty slid into every word. On the margins, Maya remained, moving coffee cups, invisible but intent. When Archer's gaze met hers a second time, she nodded almost imperceptibly. It wasn't malice, it was warning, urgency. Suddenly, the obstacles swelled, mistrust brewing across the table, Archer's own confidence buckling. He tried to recall the formula detail, the chain of logic he'd trusted so implicitly. How could this happen? Everyone, especially Archer, knew that the room respected only perfection, not improvisation. The pressure made his next line wobble. "We, calculate a 34% net margin due to proprietary..." "Excuse me, but your depreciation metric, did you use flat or declining balance?" One investor cut in, a hint of challenge there. I, Archer stammered, caught off guard. The wrong formula. That phrase kept thrumming beneath his skull, louder now, answering none of his prayers. A thin silence stretched, the kind that could fracture a career. Now the stakes were bigger than pride or dollars. Archer had to decide. Ignore Maya's word, risk it was nothing, or trust her, re-examine the numbers, and risk humiliation in front of the sharpest minds in the valley. He looked once more at Maya, saw not threat but resolve in her stance. Something old and unquenchable flickered behind her eyes. A story, a struggle of her own, tough as steel and soft as hope. And for the first time in his driven, solipsistic journey, Archer realized what he truly stood to lose wasn't just a deal. It was his own integrity. His voice returned, shaky but honest. "Before I answer, I need one moment to double-check my calculations. I owe you complete accuracy." He glanced at Maya, gratitude and apology entwined. A murmur rippled through the room. Doubt, yes, but also a flicker of respect. Maya, collecting the last empty cup, paused at the door. Her whisper, barely audible to anyone else, lingered. Sometimes the invisible ones see what matters. A storm was brewing outside Archer's control, but at that crackling edge, integrity flashed, a small, vital spark that dared to challenge everything at stake. The real challenge, his credibility, his future, and a mysterious waitress's courage had just begun. And the next move could change everything, forever. The boardroom was no longer just a place of numbers. It became a crucible. Archer's confession, halting the pitch in front of tech titans to recheck his formula, had landed like a dropped glass. Shock, followed by sharp edges of whisper and suspicion. The investors exchanged glances, some masking irritation, others blinking with unexpected curiosity. For a heartbeat, the future vibrated between disaster and redemption. With trembling fingers, Archer opened his spreadsheet anew, sweating beneath the LED glare. Investors saw only a man wrestling with math, but Archer's world had telescoped to a single memory. His mother, once proud to serve the powerful, vanish into the unnoticed, always said, "Never ignore the voice that saves you from yourself, even when it sounds quiet." Maya moved to refill a cup at the far table, discreet but present. Archer scoured the sheet, searching for a ghost in the data. Heart racing, he found it, a cross-reference linked to last quarter's algorithm. Instead of subtracting deferred costs over time, he'd compounded them. The projection, meant to shine, had been built on sand. The profit margin wasn't 34%. It was a fragile 16%. The entire pitch, the very floor beneath him, had threatened to collapse. A hush, thick as midnight, pressed on the room as Archer took a breath. "Ladies and gentlemen, there's an error in my calculations. Before we proceed, I need to correct it so you see the real numbers, not what we hoped." The reaction was instant, a ripple of surprise, then restlessness. The Hudgens twins scoffed. Rashmi Desai studied him, ice and fire in her gaze. "Admitting a mistake takes courage," she finally murmured, cueing a flicker of interest from the financiers. "Let's see what you find." Archer recalculated on the big screen, numbers flickering, erasing illusions in real time. The new bottom line took shape, still profitable but not a moonshot. There were risks now, plainly visible. Rashmi pressed, "What's your plan to close that gap?" Suddenly, every single move mattered. Archer was exposed, vulnerable, but armed with truth. Maya, unnoticed by everyone's gaze, sent him a swift, near-invisible nod. "You did the right thing." Outside the boardroom, rain streaked the glass, as if the world was scrubbing away old bravado. Archer steadied himself. "Our value isn't just the numbers. We innovate better than anyone. We've cut costs before. We can pivot again. This is our real position. If you want fairy tales, you're in the wrong room." Some leaned back, unimpressed. Others leaned in. The conversation became sharper, honest, anchored now by integrity rather than illusion. But Archer felt the strain in every cell. He'd shown weakness, risked humiliation, all because of a whisper from a woman the world pretended was invisible. What did that say about him, about them, about the way people like Maya were forced to spot mistakes from the sidelines just to help those who sat at the table? As the discussion raged, Archer's confidence wavered, then rebuilt on new ground. He fielded questions about process, oversight, and what he'd do next. It was a gauntlet. Some questions bruised, others pushed him to imagine deeper possibilities. Each answer cost him pride, but bought him respect. Near the end, Rashmi's voice cut clear. "It's rare anyone admits a mistake in this room. I want to see your revised proposal by tomorrow. If you can pivot in a night, maybe you do deserve this table." Relief and exhaustion crashed over Archer. It wasn't triumph, but survival. As the room cleared, Archer caught one last glance at Maya. Their eyes met. Not master and servant, not executive and waitress, but kindred outliers. He nodded, a silent thank you heavy with promise. But as he packed his things, heart pounding, Archer knew the hardest battles waited outside that room, not just to save a deal, but to rewrite whose voices mattered. Because once you see the invisible, you cannot ever unsee, and the consequences ripple far beyond the glass doors. The next chapter would demand more than just numbers. It would demand real courage, and the echo of Maya's warning refused to fade. The city outside pulsed with neon, but inside the boardroom, Archer's spirit felt threadbare, stripped raw by the glare of truth, the mutter of investors, the aftershocks of risking everything on a whispered warning. Hours stretched. The pitch was over, but the aftermath unspooled. Emails flying with urgent in the header, team members texting frantic reassurances and covert blame. The razor-wire pressure that had defined Archer's entire career now threatened to cut him loose. Alone, surrounded by empty chairs and cooling coffee, Archer replayed every moment, the heat in his cheeks when the error flashed on screen, the silence that followed his admission, the way no one but Maya, a woman hired to be invisible, had given him the second chance. Guilt gnawed him, but so did a new clarity. He found Maya finishing her shift in the drab employee corridor, loading stacked cups into a soapy bin. The moment felt fragile. Archer realized he didn't even know how to begin. "Thank you," he managed at last. "You saved me from myself." "Why did you risk it?" Maya wiped her hands and looked up, eyes level. "Because it matters. Who gets hurt in rooms like that? Whose lives are changed or thrown away? I've seen people like you, ambitious, scared, trying so hard to belong. You forget to see who's holding the door open for you." The words burrowed deep, stripping away Archer's defenses. For so long he had believed success meant never admitting weakness, never asking for help. But it was the humility to listen, a humility gifted by someone the world made invisible, that had saved his life's work tonight. A ping from his phone shattered the moment. Rashmi Desai's assistant. The judging eyes of the investment world weren't done with him yet. He was to return with his revised plan. First thing tomorrow. No room for further missteps. Panic threatened, but a different impulse. Gratitude, a fierce resolve to do right by everyone, sent Archer's mind spinning. He turned to Maya, voice low and genuine. "You know the rest of the numbers as well as I do. Would you look over them? I'll pay you more than they do." Maya's smile was cautious, but it reached her tired eyes. "Sure, but only if you promise to listen, even if what I find hurts your pride." They laughed, a flicker of camaraderie blooming where loneliness had ruled a moment before. That night, Archer's office became a war room. Maya, coffee warmed and sharp, sat beside him as he redrafted projections. They challenged assumptions, argued over details, found more ghosts in his numbers. In her, Archer saw a thinker, a survivor, someone whose brilliance no privilege could buy, whose presence no title could command. For the first time, his work felt shared, not just guarded. Exhausted but renewed, the two watched the sun leak through half-closed blinds. Formulas aligned at last. Archer realized his greatest breakthrough wasn't in the math. It was in letting someone unexpected, in race, in role, in background, help reshape his vision. This was what no one in that boardroom had seen coming. The old way, built on erasure and ego, had nearly cost him everything. Now he was ready to fight for a future that included voices like Maya's at the table, not just clearing it. Tomorrow he would risk everything, but not just for himself. For truth. For change. As dawn painted the city gold, Archer smiled, uncertain but unafraid. Because trust, once found, reshaped everything. And the next challenge would be faced together. The city groaned awake outside the early morning glass, but inside Archer's office, its scattered papers and weary glow, something unbreakable was being rebuilt. The sleepless night had fused two unlikely allies at a battered conference table. Archer, no longer bulletproof, and Maya, pulled from the shadows by necessity and principle. Together they crafted the new plan. Every formula double-checked, every assumption challenged, every projection anchored in reality, not hope. As sunlight rimmed the skyscrapers, Archer gathered his courage and his freshly minted spreadsheets, Maya's notes still penciled in the margins. Exhaustion pressed at his shoulders, but the old fear was gone, replaced by a fragile pride. He hadn't just survived exposure, he had chosen it, and in return discovered an ally who saw what others missed. At the boardroom, the second round began. Investors arrived sharper, more guarded, word of his admission rippling ahead like an invisible tide. The Hudgens twins bristled. Rashmi Desai's gaze cut straight through him. "You ready?" she asked, the edge of her voice both test and invitation. Archer stood taller than before, nerves visible but resolve ironclad. "I made mistakes. Here are the real numbers. Here's how I fix them." He unveiled the revised plan, honest, robust, with cost-saving pivots and measured ambition. He outlined not just the potential, but the process, the checks, the lessons learned. He didn't sugarcoat the impact, didn't try to sell a fantasy. He finished with something no one expected. "Yesterday, my formula was wrong. It took someone outside this room to show me. I was lucky," she spoke up. "If this company's going to succeed, it needs that kind of courage everywhere, not just here." For a breathless second, the words hung in the glassy air, challenging the very structure of who belonged, who was heard. Silence. Then Rashmi leaned back, eyes gleaming with something close to respect. "We invest in truth. We invest in teams, not egos. Your mistake lost trust. Your response rebuilt it. But this—" She gestured to Maya near the door, clearly having realized her role. "This is what changes the game." Murmurs snaked the table. There were more questions, more bruising interrogations. But this time, Archer met each head-on, often looping in Maya's insights. The barrier between boardroom and periphery cracked. Finally, votes were cast. The Hudgens twins, fists clenched, abstained out of wounded pride. But Rashmi smiled as she declared, "If you can build a team out of truth, not just numbers, you'll make this investment worth more than money. Welcome to the future, Mr. Brentwood." Exhausted, Archer let relief pour through him. No wild celebration, just the deep satisfaction of something earned the hard way. Maya caught his eye, a smirk of quiet validation curving her lips. As the room emptied, Rashmi approached Archer, voice hushed. "Next time, bring Maya to the table on purpose. The days of invisible genius are done." Archer nodded, a vow written in something more lasting than profit. The pitch was won, but the real victory belonged not to a single man or a dollar sign, but to the moment two worlds collided, risked trust, and saw each other truly for the first time. Because the greatest formula in business or in life wasn't found on a spreadsheet. It was built bravely by those willing to listen. And that day, in the heart of power, the future shifted forever. The sun set over silver towers and glass canyons, bleeding gold across a city forever changed. In the afterglow of hard-won victory, the Brentwood office buzzed with the energy of renewal. New contracts, new roles, new respect humming at every desk. Yet for Archer, the noise faded beneath the memory of how it all truly began, with a whisper outside the spotlight, a warning more valuable than all the projections on Wall Street. In the days after the pitch, Archer did what few in his position ever do. He brought Maya back, not as a server but as a consultant, her name boldly inked on the project, her insights sought in public and in private. Where once she had floated unseen along the boardroom's periphery, she now sat at the table beside the engineers, the marketers, and the executives. Her voice, once an act of brave trespass, became something the team depended on. The ripple traveled further. Word spread. A waitress corrected a CEO and saved $1 million deal. Teams across town started asking who else had been left invisible in their own rooms. What ideas, what warnings, what brilliance had gone missing because no one thought to listen. Archer's relationship with Maya deepened beyond business. In quiet moments between meetings, she shared the battles she'd fought. Degrees left half-finished for her family, innovations unclaimed, knowledge hidden behind uniforms and headlines that never mentioned her name. He listened, learning humility sharper than any audit, realizing his climb up the ladder had been steadied by hands like hers, hands the world never noticed. Gradually, the company's culture shifted. Receptionists became innovation scouts. Interns gave feedback as bold as directors. Every Friday, Archer held open forums, coffee and plain talk, every level equal, Maya's idea as much as his. Laughter grew looser, but so did the expectation. Here, you are seen. Here, what you say matters. As the next quarter dawned, profits climbed, not by the fantasy numbers of Archer's old dream, but by the incremental, honest gains of a team truly working as one. The future felt different, not built on fragile pride, but woven from trust. Late one evening, Archer stood by the broad office windows with Maya. The city pulsed below, hopeful, alive. He lifted his mug in a toast to the invisible voices that change everything once you let them speak. Maya grinned, a gentle fire in her gaze. To those willing to listen, no matter what it costs. For a breath, they watched the city together, equals at last architects of their own story. Because sometimes the formula that changes your world is found in the courage to see and be seen. And in that luminous boardroom where it all began, the old rules lay broken in their place, a blueprint for real belonging, the kind that turns whispers into legacies and strangers into the future.